a Drupalism. We'll come to that later. But that's used in the naming of the database tables. And you keep seeing field. It's ugly as heck. But and these are the things that are on our front page. Here we see that there's a title, there's a body, there's a little an image. We can see it as a standalone page. This little image is the image of the user. That's my avatar. It's Tarwifra's avatar. There you go. And there's a little tagging system down the bottom. Very, very simple, basic setup. But this is the part which is views. Now, views is really, really exciting because that front page is built as a view. And what it does is it just says, let's have, here we say we're going to get the content, and we're going to, say we're looking for content which is allowed to be on the front page. It's in a published state, not unpublished, and so on. And we're going to sort it by the priority ones at the top, and then we're going to sort it by the date that it was written if none of them have priority. And we're going to show 10 per page, and you can put access control on it. You can add running headers and footers and so on. Yeah, we're not interested in any of that. The point is, that is how the front page is built. If we go down to the very bottom of the front page, we'll see something, hopefully. It's a lot of gibberish. Good old RSS icon. Drupal has RSS built in. I wish I could see that as a raw RSS. You can view source, can't you? Yeah, so we get RSS coming in. Quick reminder, this was the original REST API. Before JSON became trendy, this was what your REST API was. This is where you got your content, and you could, parse it with jQuery and everything. It was beautiful. The point I need to show you is that it's the same darn content, but it's coming through it's coming through views. Views doesn't just render HTML, it can render all kinds of other outputs. And the feed is just one example. There are so many plugins for views that, and this can all be configured through, someone uploading a module by FTP and then point and click and they get some output. You can get JSON output from views. You can get extra plugins that will do things like not just RSS, but include things like iTunes RSS tags as well if you want to publish a podcast. And if you're outputting JSON, well, it's not just any old JSON. You can go into the fields that you're going to display and start customizing the names of the fields and things like that. So you could quite easily, with a few plugins, start outputting some GeoJSON that's formatted. If you've got some longitude, latitude type fields inside your database, then a front-end application could be written in JavaScript. It could load up a mapping library like OpenLayers or Leaflet, and then connect that up with a GeoJSON feed, which would actually be built in this way. So that's a quick introduction to what Drupal is like. The one thing I didn't show you was the modules. These are the modules that come with a different activity trackers, banning users, blah, 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 comments and everything. They're all optional. You can turn these things off. Down at the bottom, we have a bunch of things, HAL and RESTful web services and serialization. They're not turned on by default, but they're what we're interested in today. That's how you're going to get your JSON out of a Drupal database. So that's the quick intro to Drupal. Web services. Now, in the days of Drupal 6, Drupal 7, it was really hard to get web services up and running on Drupal. Drupal was geared up as a traditional CMS. Its job was to publish HTML pages. And if you wanted to do anything else, like, feeds were there, but if you wanted to do, make it available as RDF embedded in XML, or if you wanted to make JSON available, if you wanted to do CSV exports, if you wanted to let people get into Drupal with an XML remote procedure call, it was really, really hard to let anyone do that. It was an awkward bolt-on. Web pages, they're just a REST API. when you request a web page, you're sending a HTTP request, you're saying what content type you're going to accept. You'll accept HTML, and it comes back. That's all it is. It comes back with a 200. Here's your page. That's just like getting Twitter statuses via JSON. Web pages are just a really, really common form of HTTP request. So Drupal 8 had the big, big refactor. It was no longer about web pages first. It was about doing HTTP requests first. And then web pages were just the common use case on top of that. It was a refactor that took many, many years. But the idea was that as well as publishing web pages, it would also come with some built-in web services for making the content available as JSON or XML. And it's there in Drupal 8. So let's have a look at those. I went and enabled a few of these. On this screen, you can't quite tell which ones are enabled, but I enabled the REST services. Serialization is turned on. It gives us JSON and XML. There are many add-ons for other kinds of serialization format. And authentication is pluggable. You can get basic authentication. You can have OAuth. There are many others. And I plugged in a UI to configure this. So the way that I did this was to find the page which said that I could configure my REST services. And there's a huge long list of things and buttons to enable them. You can put all sorts of things out there, but all I decided to do was let our pages and articles be open. And it's just at the /node/node ID is exactly the same URL as we're using in the web page to have a look at one of our articles. We'll see that it's at node 715, right? If I go back here, I can turn it on. There's a nice little thing. I can decide what formats I'm going to let it come out as and what kind of methods I'm going to make available. Can we just get them, or will I let you post stuff? And what kind of authentication we're going to do. I've left everything completely wide open. So we're going to go now to the command line. Yay! Now somewhere in my history I've got a few command line curl requests. Here we go. Let's try this one. So if I go to /node/1, this is what Vero, that's the title of this blog post by Mr. Brusho. It just looks like this as a web page, but if I go and type the very, very same path, /node/1, and then append a little query telling it I want it in JSON, boom, here is the very, very, very same thing. I get language codes, revision IDs, all sorts of things. Tells me it's an article. Sooner or later I get a title, and that's Vero. So there is a basic thing. That's JSON, right? You've all seen that? And that's just one. There you go. There's the rest of it. There's a whole few other things. Target. It's got the field image, field tags, those ugly Drupalisms there. And you'll see that the taxonomy terms that it's had associated with it, these will be at the bottom of the page, UAP and nutaposal, are not actually there. Instead, we've just got some IDs for them. So if we actually wanted to know what the tags were, that's a bit awkward. We've got to get the actual article, and then we've got to find out some other things, and then make some other requests to try and find out what the names of those tags are. Yuck! But them's the breaks. By the way, you can have this in XML. Dead easy. Failed writing body. Well, we don't like that. Live demos for you. Format equals XML. No, XML ain't working today. So we wanted a better format. And this all started about 8 years ago. What kind of format are we going in? Now, this is before JSONAPI or any of those kind of things. Does anyone remember HAL? The hypertext application language. One person knows it. It's an IETF RFC, HAL-JSON. It's a way of putting hypertext documents over JSON. And it's very, very similar Now in this one I'm going to pipe it through the less thing. But look at the very first line. Links, self, and then it tells you this is the one it is. Further on down, it's going to tell us something else about the links. It might have links to some related things, which are the tags, which are the image, and so on, and it tells you where you can get that image from. So I could, let's see if I can click on that, see if it works. Open link, try that. Boom, yeah, so I can get that. So that's a way which makes it a shortcut. But you know what? HAL never caught on. It was one of those decisions that got made, 8 years ago. We're going to go for HAL. This is the way forward. It was really popular amongst the link data community, but the wider front-end community just never really liked it. So that's what we're stuck with in Drupal core. So we're going to go back to the slides. Those were the ones that come built in with Drupal. But Drupal's an extensible system. It's got a lot of extra add-on modules. And as well as the HAL-JSON, which is in core, we can definitely get JSONAPI out of Drupal through a contrib module. We can get a few other things as well. I've mentioned GeoJSON as the views plugin. GraphQL is working quite nicely with Drupal. The core is what you download when you download Drupal. And what you saw today was Drupal with a couple of developer tools, and that was it, basically. But as well as contrib, you can start downloading contrib modules piecemeal, or you can go for something called a distribution. And you've all heard of Linux distributions, and they're geared for some are server, some are for desktop, some are aimed at graphic designers and music studios. Some are aimed at being a home theater system. Well, just like that, Drupal's a content management system with distributions. Is that how you even spell that? But what that is where someone has taken a bunch of contrib modules and bundled them together as a downloadable package, along with a whole load of installable configuration. And these come as learning management systems, online forum in a box, intranet in a box, case tracker in a box, and there are a couple of distros aimed at working as headless Drupal setups. Get up and running very quickly. Demo. So one of those is called Contenta CMS. There is another page somewhere. This one. Contenta is an API-first Drupal distribution. It takes all those things like GraphQL and OpenAuth authentication and documentation generators and wraps them all up in an install profile and gives you some specimen content to play around with. The specimen content is a recipe database. Great. And I've got one up and running. It looks a little bit different to Drupal. It's got this awful, inaccessible admin thing going on. But the important thing is down at the bottom, the web services, there's a whole load of other stuff turned on. As well as the HAL, it's also got JSONAPI turned on. It's got schemata. That's part of the documentation generator. I'm still learning about this stuff because I've yet to use it in anger on a real project. And what else has it got? It's got GraphQL. That's been turned on. What else is in there? It's got some of the multimedia stuff, so it's got better handling for images. OpenAPI, that's what Swagger became, isn't it? Did it get renamed? OpenAPI Swagger, is that right? Yeah. Well, Swagger's there. Not turned on is a documentation generator with Swagger UI, but OpenAPI and Redoc documentation. I don't know. I'm still learning this thing. The point is, it's all up and running. We can go and have a look at the content. When the darn thing works. And see that in here we've got the same kind of content stuff. There's a whole load of tutorial pages and what other types have they got? They must have some types. Content type. Gosh, why is this not working? I'm going to turn on the default admin theme. That's more like it. Recipes. Let's have a look at recipes, shall we? Filter them. Recipes have got stuff like pork fillet apple and sweet potato bake, which is, now here we're not seeing something that's presented as a web page. This is really just what's going on in the CMS. We can look at the editing form for it. Ooh, images, preparation time, total time, difficulty, the ingredients. These are all entity fields. The content manager can click around and generate these. To make those available as JSON API, I found my way to this page. What was this page? JSON API resource config. And this was a really interesting bit because I went down and found the articles and the recipes and so on, and then I clicked into the settings for those. And this is how a recipe is exposed over JSON API. Again, this is all just point and click stuff. But further down, I found a really awesome feature, which was this part here. Field recipe instruction is what that horrible Drupalism is, and that's what it's called in the database. But in the JSON API, it's actually going to be called instructions. That's it. Field number of services is just called number of services. There was a horrendous one somewhere. This was it. Field recipe reviews and testimo. They ran out of characters for the name of that field, but it's just called reviews when you get it. Now this is beautiful because if someone configures this nicely, you won't even know you're talking to Drupal, right? Unless you look at the HTTP headers and see whether the cache was hit. And so the word Drupal will appear in there. So, and the really, really cool thing they did with the Contenter CMS is they went and explore, Discover API. They made a nice landing page for it. That doesn't look helpful. API, is that the one I want? Do you know what? I bet this is because I went and turned off the gosh darn default thing. I'll tell you what, ignore that. We'll go to the one that's online and find... Oh yeah, if I go here and say type /API, oh, am I online? I am now. There you go, that's the one. Can't live without my tethering. If I go there, I will find, oh my goodness, there are all sorts of things which are there, and I've got this /API, and I've got /image styles, /content types, /recipes. They're all really, really cool. What happens if can I click on these? No, let's type on it. /recipes. Oh, that's wanting to go and download some JSON from the thing. Oh, what heck. You know, we'll drop that in our downloads folder and see what we got. Downloads folder, recipes. Let's open up a console and CD downloads and do cat recipes, send that through JQ. Oh, recipes! And that was what we got. Instructions, preparation time, number of services. Those were the fields where we went and prettified the names and got rid of the Drupalisms. That's lovely. But where is the documentation? Well, somewhere on this, I did find it. Hang on. Some demo site of the specimen content. Explore, somewhere down there. API, where's that? Loading. This is what I was looking at. This is absolutely fantastic, I think. This is very exciting. It's all of that stuff, all of Drupal's data structure, content, recipe, and it's run through and gone and auto-generated some some API documentation for you, and it's brilliant. It shows you exactly what kind of thing you can get back, what kind of... does this all make sense to you guys? Because I'm still learning it. Where? Yeah, that's about the documentation. But the point is that the documentation has been prepared from the way that Drupal as a CMS has been configured. No one had to write that documentation. So that, I think, is really quite exciting. I think I'm running out of time now, so I'll just go back and say, the way the future is going, more and more of this API-first stuff is going to go into Drupal core. They definitely want to get JSONAPI and OAuth into Drupal core, and an idea is to get an API-first headless CMS installation profile into Drupal core as well. Contenter is a kind of a community-led thing. It won't go into core wholesale. Rather, what core tends to do is look at take inspiration from the experiments that have been going on in the community and then decide what you want from core. Stuff we have no time to talk about today. GraphQL is working and it's great. The Contenter out-of-the-box content has also got GraphQL enabled, so you can play with that. Authentication is too dull to talk about, but I've set it up successfully. CouchDB replication is also a capability of Drupal, and that's something which our use case is content staging, from draft version of website, published version of website. Also ideas that you might have one central content management system for managing lots and lots of microsites. Spoke to one of the big London arts organisations is using one central CMS, and no one visits that, but lots and lots of microsites and apps get the information for like just one event or one season as promotional type sites. It also raises the idea that you might be able to use Drupal as a way for field agents, environmental inspectors, building site inspectors, and that might be able to do offline first access to their own content, say. And that's the end. I hope I've given you some cause to think that Drupal might be a cool thing to work with, or some way of dealing with it when someone tells you the back end is Drupal and you're going to be talking to it. Okay, thank you. Yes, does anyone have any questions? How am I doing for time, Luke?
If there are any questions, do you want to shout them out now, or
get me at the pizza, maybe.
Oh, cool. Well,
cool.
Yep. Look for one in the very far corner. Leave one next to it. Then do this close to the right.
No JavaScript in that. Now, I'm going to give you the microphone.